At the start of Advent, when preaching about hope, I had expressed that hope used to be a puzzling emotion for me. You don't really understand hope until those moments that you think you have lost it. But joy. I thought I knew joy. Joy is easy. Yet, as I grow in ministry, I realize how little I understand what joy is, and how much I've underestimated the importance of it. What is joy? If, like me, you struggle to define it, don't worry. Scholars and theologians also struggle with it. We don't have a clear consensus on joy. Professor Pamela Epstein-King says that when investigating psychological perspectives on joy and adolescence, she found 0 results in 2016. Scholars focus on positive emotions like happiness and awe or compassion and patience, but joy gets overlooked in psychology circles. Joy, however, is very much talked about by theologians. Only they can't all agree on what it is. Yale has a center devoted to the theology of joy. And here's a clip from a video they produced with some leading theologians.
The simple answer is joy is a kind of emotion that responds to things. I think we all have a kind of intuitive sense of what joy is. It's what we feel when we see, little children playing happily, or when we see a beautiful sunset or a great work of art. We feel very positive. And so it's a feeling, an emotion in response to something else.
Joy I take to be that emotion which happens when I care about reality being a certain way, and I judge that it is that way.
I think of joy as involving really, I think, the combination, to make it very succinct, of happiness plus gratitude.
It is this sense of contentment with the choices that one makes and the paths that one pursues and declines to pursue.
I look at joy as an act of resistance against despair and its forces, all the forces of despair.
The key essence behind joy is that it's about connection. It's about connection with something that is beyond ourselves.
From my point of view, I mean, if we're talking about Christian joy, which is, I think, quite different from other forms of joy, I think joy is fundamentally about a relationship with God. It has to be rooted in that relationship.
But it's also something like a virtue. Something that we're called upon to practice in the light of the relationships that we have with God and with one another.
You know, joy for theologians is called a fruit of the Spirit. It's number 2 in the list after love. That's a hugely important thing.
I find joy to be a deep-seated sense of well-being with oneself and one's life and the way one is living in the world. That comes from a wisely lived life.
So joy can be an emotion, it's a mood, a state of being, it can be a character trait or disposition. And for Christians, it is a spiritual fruit. But still I'm confused. What does it feel like? And how is it different than, say, happiness?
When I ask people, what is joy to you, or how would you differentiate between joy and happiness? Some people don't, but many people do. And I think one of the differences they say is that joy goes deeper. One friend of mine said that happiness is an inch deep and a mile wide, whereas joy is a mile deep and a mile wide. And I like that.
There is a sense, this is a little bit radical, but there's a sense in which happiness has a self-centered element to it. And that's true in our current notion of happiness in positive psychology or the self-help books, 7 steps to personal happiness. Joy is a state as positive, as attractive, as all-consuming as happiness. But it's happiness transmuted into the context where an action of God, the presence of God, the grace of God, felt by the individual, the person opening herself to the presence of God, and the person sending back in praise and worship, gratitude and awareness of that relationship constitutes the life of joy.
But then if we turn to the Bible, where we don't get conversation about happiness, we do get lots of conversations about joy, and some of them map rather neatly onto our common sense notions of joy as a positive response to favorable circumstances.
Gratitude involves celebration and suffering, much like joy does. I think that really helps differentiate it from happiness, which really doesn't involve those two elements. It might involve celebration, but certainly not the perception of suffering, the possibility that some sort of redemptive twist can occur in the face of something that is, on the face, seemingly very devastating.
I like the description of joy being deep. It deepens the contrast with an emotion like elation or ecstasy. Like in elation, you feel that you're transcending yourself, or some would say obliterating the self. But joy makes you more intensely you. There is transcendence and freedom in joy, but also vitality and harmony. It can occur because something good has happened, or despite something bad happening. It is strong and resilient, and is a trait or a virtue that can be cultivated.
You have to have conditions set up where those people who have learned how to ride the winds of chaos can say to you, come on, let me show you how to do that. I think that's the first thing you have to have.
So the natural world, which we may normally go through unthinkingly, or sometimes be surprised by the natural world, is cultivated through religious ritual so that one pays greater attention to that world. And one cultivates a sense of gratitude and joy of being a creature. Those aspects are deepened through the ongoing nature of the religious life.
I can say that one of the ways that has been meaningful for me is participating in a community of worship, a community that sings on a regular basis, a community that enjoys and contemplates the message of symbols in imagery, a community that where in the presence of other people you can't help but laugh and smile and enjoy.
If we look across the many world traditions and the different religious traditions, we see time and time again that there's one dimension of personal spirituality which is by far the most predictive of health and wellness, the greatest source of resilience, really known to the medical or social sciences. And that is a strong personal relationship with the divine, a direct relationship, a two-way lived relationship with our higher power.
There needs to be a centeredness of the self. And for the whole Bible, it's in the Lord God, maker of heaven and earth.
I have been in spaces of joy in hospital rooms, gathered with a family and a loved one who's passing on, but in the midst of that incredible joy connected to sorrow.
In a podcast, Professor of Systematic Theology and Africana Studies, Willie Jennings, describes the type of joy that he was taught and trained in as a Black man growing up in the American South. He says, "My parents and my people worked hard at joy. Is a virtue that they crafted within themselves as an act of resistance against oppression. Joy work," he says, "is always body work, a body angling itself against despair, like a dance." In the same way, Jesus' joy was found in contradiction, not in the resolution of contradiction. It is the struggle and dancing with struggles. Rabbi Bunim from the 19th century Poland tells this story about joy. A certain individual slipped and fell into the swift current of a surging river. Another moment and he would drown. Everyone panicked, and they were all crying out in terror, "Save him! Save him!" And they were all astonished to hear Rabbi Bunim cry out to the drowning man, "Give my regards to Leviathan," that legendary giant fish. The drowning man, who had lost hope of fighting the current, heard him and suddenly began to struggle again to save himself. Why? Because the rabbi's levity snatched him out of his despair and roused his will to live. He finally found a floating plank that had been cast out from a passing ship, and he held on to it until he could get back safely to shore. There was a big crowd on the shore, but the man went straight to Rabbi Bunam and fell on his neck, saying, "You saved my life. If it wasn't for your clever words, I would have died. But your words roused my will to live. Because of you, I'm alive." And then Rabbi Bunam would conclude, "See the power of joy." Joy is powerful. It trains our imaginations to envision good things, which later, because we could dream it, is more likely to become a reality. You don't have to feel happy to be feeling joy. It's not the opposite of depression. Paul says to rejoice in your sufferings, rejoice always. That means even when you are depressed. This is also what we see happening in our Old Testament reading today. The prophet Isaiah writes to a people in exile, giving them a vision of returning home. It will be beautiful, Isaiah says. While they are struggling, and now Isaiah is inviting them to dream, calls them to rejoice and delight. I delight greatly in the Lord, my soul rejoices in my God. Hope, peace, joy, and love are feelings, but are also more than feelings. They can persist and be a core part of your life, regardless of your current emotional state. It's something that you can learn and practice, and by the grace of God, intentionally be choosing for yourself. And joy is the vision of heaven that we are working towards. Rabbi Shlomo says that there is one antidote to hatred: joy. If we are dreaming of the whole world being one, it will only happen with joy. So what is joy? I'm still not sure. After such a long academic discussion of it, my apologies for that, I still can't put it into a single sentence. But I know it, just as you know it. It is there within us. As Christians, just as we make room for Christ in our hearts, let's be making room for the joy of Christ. Let's make it a practice to rejoice and delight. As we end this sermon, I'm going to leave us with a short song from Steve Bell. There were elders from Sherwood Park who blessed me with tickets to his show, and he recently released an album of instrumental music. This particular song I'm playing, he wrote during the pandemic. It was a time when he was struggling with depression, and yet the tune turned out to be really bouncy and happy. Part of him felt like that song's happiness was a lie. And yet when he thought about it, he came to the conclusion that while he was miserable, he was also joyful. Joy was with him, in him, despite the depression also being present. He still experienced moments of joy and delight, and he could make an intentional effort to be drawing attention to that delight, to be making room for it. He said in that concert, "I'm sad, yes, but that's not all of who I am. I am also delight. In my daughter, in my granddaughter, in my hamburger off a grill, in all these things of life." So both these things can be true. Sad and joy. And so that's what this song was titled. This too is true. As you listen to it, consider what joy is for you and what you can be doing to cultivate more of it in your life. Amen.